I was bringing this topic up with Helena last night because she hasn't read this, and I was just wanted to say, like, I wanted to get her, just not having thought of it in these terms before. What do you think? And Isaac, I thought it was interesting that she had a similar thought to you on having more of an inclination to think that there was a real essence on male and female, but not so much with the concept of table. She said that it had something to do with the fact that tables were an invention. I thought it was interesting if that was her take, because it kind of reminded me of what you were saying, Isaac, that like there's more of an urge to say that there is something real on male and female than there is to say there is some real essence of table, because at some point someone invented that. Someone invented a table. And so we went back and forth on that, but I thought it was interesting that was her perspective too.
Any discussion of that?
Obviously, I tend to agree. I do have some notes, and we'll get into this in the next one, but on the bottom of 144, it's somewhat similar, where he says some true things about the realist view regarding Plato and Aristotle, but then he goes on to make inferences from that about epistemology that aren't accurate. To give him the benefit of the doubt, my thinking is maybe he's just saying that these were their inferences rather than saying that these are the things that actually follow. I hope that's what he's saying. But the thing that I want to stress that I've written in my notes there is that those things don't actually follow. But that's again, the same thing that we've been talking about. The paragraph that starts, the Platonic and Aristotelian realists regard essence as metaphysical. So I agree with everything that he says. Through the middle of that paragraph, every entity accordingly must have an essence. After that semicolon, the so and everything after that, I think, does not follow. He says, so there is no option in regard to human classification, no room for contextual revision or definitions, and no answer other than intuition to the problem of borderline cases. So that's all epistemology. I don't think it's true that all of those epistemological points follow from that metaphysical position that he was describing before that.
And that kind of goes back to what you were saying, Jacob, that you could say, like, why couldn't someone reply and say, this is a fact intrinsic in physical nature, independent of any need or state of human consciousness, that there are essences, and say, but still there is an option in regard to human classification, and there is still, nevertheless, room for contextual revision. One could say that without contradicting. But I do think there's a good objection to this next paragraph. So, to which nominalists reply, every aspect of an entity is a part of its nature. How then can we single out certain features as inherently more important than others? To say there is a table-ness in this table here, but everything about it is real. Like, so how is there one part of it that's more... The whole thing is a table, so how is there one part of it that's more table-y?
When you say it's essential, what are you saying? That's what you're asking. Yeah.
Or are you just saying there is something that's really the same between this table and my coffee table over there? Like, how would you reply to that nominalist objection that says everything about it is
equally real?
Everything about it is equally real. Every aspect of an entity is a part of its nature.
Are you saying, Andrew, are you asking that question of the realist position?
Yeah. How do you respond to that part?
Well, because the realist position is saying that the actual essence of tablehood, whatever it is real. It's also saying that the actual essence of being 6 feet by 4 feet is real. And the actual essence of being brown or being black is real. And so all of those things, all of those attributes or characteristics, which a given particular table are, quote unquote, participating in, are real, but you're distinguishing between that which is essential to the table and that which is not essential to the table. Does that help answer?
Yeah. So like if you say man is a rational animal, you could change my skin color and I would still be just as much of a man as having the skin color that I have now. My skin color and my quality of being rational are equally real, but how is one really more essential? How is one in reality more essential apart from any observation?
It's saying it's essential to your being a human. It's saying in respect to considering you as a man, there are certain things that are more essential to that than other things.
But then it sounds like you're affirming everything that Peikoff says. If you're going to conceptualize essential as only being for the purpose of epistemology, then you're saying that essential is an epistemological term only, right?
No, so the epistemology maps the metaphysics. So there is an essence called manhood, and when in epistemology, in our minds, when we are trying to identify that concept of manhood and distinguish it from other things about Andrew, we're trying to approximate or map the essence of manhood in reality, in metaphysics.
When you say essence, are you referring to specifically the way Rand uses those terms? Like she would say that man could have skin color along these ranges, but that the essential, when she says essence, she only means the essential facts about man necessary for us to create a definition. That's all she means, which would mean animality, rationality. Are you using it that way, or are you using it as, or when you say the essence of man, you just mean manness, like being a man?
So sort of both. So because you can mean it in an epistemological sense and in a metaphysical sense. What I'm saying is the epistemological sense of essence should map the metaphysical sense. So there is a metaphysical essence called manness. And as we attempt in epistemology to identify the essence of our concept of manness, we ought to be attempting to approximate the metaphysical essence called manness.
So speaking about metaphysical essence, does metaphysical essence, does that refer only to animality, rationality, or does that refer to all of man's qualities?
It at least refers to animality and rationality. The difficulty is that we don't fully know, and this is where I agree with Rand and Peikoff on the flexibility on potentially alter definition, because we don't have direct access to the metaphysical essence. We only have access to it through the particulars that we've observed. And so it's accurate, given our context, to say that the metaphysical essence is animality and rationality. But it's possible that there's more to that essence that we have not discovered yet. And when we do discover more to it, then we will revise our definition of it. And that sort of explains the interplay between epistemology and metaphysics. When we do need to modify a definition, it's because we've discovered something in reality, in metaphysics, about the essence of the thing that we're referring to that has caused us to need to alter the definition.
On your way of understanding these issues, would you say that it's possible to be aware of an entity and have some working knowledge of it, but not be aware of its essence?
Yes, if we're talking about the metaphysical, it's possible to not be aware of all of the information about its essence, because, like I said, we don't have direct access to it. So it's a progressively, gradually learning thing. But that doesn't mean that we couldn't distinguish it from the other things that we're currently aware of to begin to approximate its essence.
Are you distinguishing between the thing's metaphysical essence and the thing? Are those two different ideas?
Yes, because on the realist position, each particular participates in given essences.
It sounded like, Cody, you were making an allusion to the portion of a couple chapters or maybe a couple sections ago where he said a context doesn't just refer to the definition. So like he says that man, the concept man, Peikoff says it refers to everything, including having thumbs and everything, as opposed to just animality and rationality. So when we say that if there's a metaphysical essence of manness, does, to put it in kind of a funny way, does manness have thumbness? Or does manness, does the essence of man also include not addressing the measurement of how long my thumb is or something, but does the essence of man also include the essence of arm and two legs and starts out as a baby and everything like that?
Are you asking Jacob?
Yeah.
Sorry, I thought that you were addressing that to Cody originally.
No,
and as you were
sorry,
going, I was like, this doesn't really seem relevant to Cody.
Yeah. Yeah. To your view, like, does the essence of man include the essence of thumb and arm and breathing and things like that?
Yeah. The short answer is I don't know, because I agree with Rand and Peikoff. I agree that it's a contextual and expanding definition. I also haven't given a whole lot of thought to everything that I would include in the concept of the essence of man. I definitely would say that the ideal man has all of those things, but someone could lose their thumb. They could lose both thumbs or be born without thumbs and still be a man. And so in that sense, those things aren't essential, but they are essential to the general concept of like the ideal man or what man is designed to be.
Jacob, there is one thing I wanted to mention. You had originally brought up the middle paragraph on 144. I was just reading it over, and I think that Peikoff is only representing what he takes the historical claim to be.
That's what I was, like I said, my charitable view of that paragraph is that he is just representing the other position and saying, and their inference from that is therefore XYZ about epistemology. If that's the case, then I agree with him, because that is what many of them have concluded from that realist position.
Yeah, because I didn't happen to know. So you're saying historically that actually that's an accurate report of their position?
Generally speaking, I think so. I mean, there's going to be a lot of potential nuance there, but generally speaking, yes, I think so.
So then it's a separate question of whether it indeed does logically follow. It doesn't necessarily. It depends on some other issues. You would want to affirm some of it, but then not affirm that conclusion.
Yeah, I would want to affirm, I think I would say I want to affirm everything before the semicolon and the so.
You have the potential for working out a unique system, a unique answer to all these issues if you wanted to. I think that you could. And I have a different project. Mine is more modest because all I'm doing is saying I agree with this as a Christian. But they're both good projects, and they would have the potential to have fruitful discussion between those two perspectives.
I hope this is a quick question. When we say a man is being effeminate, aren't we sort of affirming that there's some kind of metaphysical essence of man that they're actively working against? Like when we call someone aren't we in a way affirming that there's some kind of metaphysical essence?
You mean like when you make your lip sync videos?
Yeah, that.
Be careful to use the term essence as a term of art rather than as a colloquial term, because I mean anybody could say that that somebody who's acting effeminate is essentially acting unmanly or something like that. But what we're talking about with the essence is either essence as used specifically within Aristotle's system or within Rand's system. So, I mean, if you were to analyze your question from Rand's perspective, you would say that there is in the world many different men, many different women, and that there are certain qualities about men and women. They're constructed in a certain way, and a certain form of action is appropriate to their construction. So, for instance, let's say I tried to crawl around like a dog on the ground. You would say, well, you're not acting according to your essence, are you, Cody? But when you say according to your essence there, you're using it colloquially. Thanks, Jacob. He says he has to go. You would not be using essence in the term of art sense. You would just be saying you're not acting the way that a man is constructed. You're not acting according to your nature. And your nature includes all the facts. So likewise, for homosexuality, we would say that goes against nature. I mean, just like walking backward goes against nature, but it's a different level of perversity. I mean, because there's reasons why you could legitimately want to walk backward, many reasons. So, I mean, but imagine if a person said, I'm going to tie one of my feet up and I'm just going to hop around all my life. You would say, well, you're not acting according to the way that you're constructed. Why would you not want to act the way that you're constructed? And that's what's going on with a man who is acting in a way that is characteristically softer, or is characteristically, I mean, what are the things when we say effeminacy? Maybe we mean higher pitch in speech. We mean more tentative in the way that you make your pronouncements. It's more characteristic of a woman to listen and be receptive and then try to suggest changes rather than to simply pronounce them. I mean, you can see that even in like your kids. If you have a boy and a girl, one of them is going to tend to just tell you what he wants, and one of them is going to tend to try to get you to want what she wants. It's just a difference in the way that people think, and there are differences in the way people think based on gender, and there are differences in people's capacities physically. I mean, it's completely understandable why the version of people that are physically twice as strong would rely more on direct, we're just going to say what we want and we're going to go get it. Whereas those that are not capable of physically outmanning other people, they're going to rely on deception or craft or cunning. So they're typically more associated, the manipulation is more associated with being a woman than a man. And there's other aspects as well, such as if you were to ask, well, with a man, the man, since he has twice as much strength, he would be the one that's expected to do the hunting and the farming and the plowing, the reaping. And since a woman is shorter and since she's the one that bears children, she would be the one that's expected to do the work involving the children because the children are smaller. And she's the one that can naturally, physically provide for the children by feeding them. So there's all these reasons why we have these characteristic assumptions about what men and women typically do. I was reading Proverbs 31 this morning, and that Proverbs 31 woman doesn't work inside the home only. She's making money. She's got business enterprises. She's making deals with men. There's no assumption here that, like an intrinsicist perspective on every man must be the main profitable breadwinner, and every woman must be at the house teaching the kids homeschool. A man could homeschool his kids. A man could do what Proverbs 31 speaks of, which is to sit in the gate. So he's not using his muscles as he sits in the gate. He's talking to the other men and judging as people come through with their controversies. So it could be a manly thing to do that. But the essential difference between the man and the woman is seen in Proverbs 31. It's seen in every observation we make in reality. We say essential difference just in this sense, meaning like the difference in their existence. That's the colloquial use of the term essential. It's different from what Rand is using. If she was going to distinguish academically, philosophically, precisely, what's the difference between man and woman? You could talk about chromosomes. You could talk about your physiology. You could talk about your respective role within the species. One of them reproduces or bears children. One of them is the father of the children. So all of these different things, they would be brought into, if you're going to say what is the essential difference. But there we're speaking philosophically, or we're speaking academically, technically. Any engagement with that, Isaac?
Yeah, I think originally I was coming at it from this idea of essence kind of tells you what should be. And it sounds to me like what you're saying is, and what you're saying is helpful if you're kind of constructing the essence based off of what is, which I don't know if you can then claim that what you construct from what is, which that then is the essence, then can you go from that to what should be? I don't know if you can make that jump, which I think is what I was doing. But what you're saying is that because we know what is, we just observe when people deviate from what is. And we may call that, if it's a man deviating from what we observe to be, we call that effeminate. I don't know if that.
Well, we actually can argue from what is to what ought to be.
Okay.
And that's there's a disagreement about this historically within philosophers. David Hume was a famous philosopher who said you can't go from what is to what ought to be. And Rand is one of the strongest examples of somebody saying, yes, you can. And that's actually what the rest of the book is going to be about. Once we get about 50 more pages in, the rest of the book is so yeah, it's going to be great. It's going to rock your world. So
awesome.
What she's doing is pointing out that it does follow that a certain kind of behavior is proper to a certain kind of creature based on the constitution of the creature. Like for instance, you could say that certain foods will give us nutrition, and certain things that you could put in your body will kill you. Therefore, from that you can reason that it is proper that this living being would conduct itself this way, not that way. And she says everything about what is important for determining everything about what ought. That said, with men and women, just to apply it to the issue of effeminacy, we don't want to take an intrinsicist approach to this, which is that all men, by definition, have to have beards. They have to have a certain muscle mass. They have to be a certain height, otherwise they're girly. They have to talk in a certain pitch in their voice, otherwise they're girly. That's the intrinsicist approach that you see from the theonomist camp. It just makes clowns of everybody, and it makes it so that it gives fuel for the subjectivists, because they'll just look at us and they'll be like, you guys are so dumb. You're not thinking. The perspective that I take on this is not the intrinsicist or the subjectivist view. It's that you can look in reality and say what is appropriate to a man to do the things that a man is called to do. And how do you know what's a man called to do? Well, man, the law of nature is that you need to live. And so you ask yourself, what's suitable for a man to do in order to live? And the man is going to be the one that has more strength in the relationship. Peter says the woman is the weaker vessel. And so it follows from that the man ought to be doing things to provide for his wife and his children. Different things. Typical definition of like what is a man's role in a relationship is lead, provide, protect. Where do we get those ideas? Well, the one who's physically stronger is more suited to lead, to provide, to protect. That just follows from the definition of being physically stronger. There's also men have more aggression. So it's not just their muscle mass, but it's also that they have a tendency psychologically to engage in aggression more often. They're more likely to quickly respond to danger using physical force. They're more likely in the situation that is unknown to be aware of danger. They're more attuned to it. Now, it doesn't follow that every man is better at perceiving danger than every woman, any more than it follows that every man can beat every woman in basketball. But on average, an average man can beat most women in basketball. And unless you have military training, an average man is going to be more suited to a combat situation than most women. That's just the way it works. These are scientific facts, but from it follows a certain disposition. Once you recognize that fact, you recognize, well, then I must live my life in accordance with that fact. And living your life in accordance with that fact would entail a range of choices. Those choices would involve things like demonstrate in my tone of voice bravery. That's important. Now, it's not bad for a woman to demonstrate bravery in her tone of voice, but that is perhaps not the thing that she's fixated on primarily. Maybe she would want to, primarily as she's deciding what her tone of voice should be, she wants to communicate a sense of nurturing. And you cannot fixate on two different things at the same time. So you have to sort of have a vision for yourself, a self-image of what am I doing in the world? Am I being a nurturer? Am I being a helpmeet? Versus am I being one who is striving and one who is achieving? I mean, this is not exactly within the province of philosophy anymore, because we're talking about psychology and we're talking about your concept for your own life, and you have to determine that. You have to define it. yourself. You can't look at other people and just say, I want to copy that. It can be helpful to have somebody like John Wayne or somebody like Howard Rourke, but you can see that there's a huge range. John Wayne would be more burly and not particularly like good with words. Howard Rourke is philosophical. He's scrawny as far as he's muscular, but he's like a beanpole. You can't just look and say that manhood has to look like a certain thing. But what you can say is that in action, this is a person taking actions appropriate to that overall vision of a man's role in the world.
Yeah, it makes sense. There's a lot to think about there. I think for me, I get a little bit tripped up on conceptually what we talk about when we mean really just the word, first of all, metaphysical, but then especially metaphysical essence. So anyways, there's a lot of work on my part that I need to do to kind of make that a little bit more defined. And so I kind of get out of the colloquial uses of those terms.
Any other topics on your mind? Otherwise, it's the three of us right now. So, and Jennifer, you're welcome to come on if there's anything. I understand you like just watching because it's so early over here.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Yes, it's very early. And I really appreciated what you said earlier, Cody, about the reputational suicide, because there's a strong opinion that theism, there's no place for theists in objectivism. Mm-hmm. And I experience, especially on Twitter, I have a longstanding rapport and friendships with some of these objectivists. And some of them are very much like, find what's compatible. And then, that rocks, right? But then there's other people who are they're just like, there's no place for that here. And I think, why don't you want us to be on the same squad? Like, don't you want like Christians who are out there preaching altruism? Don't you want Christians like me who say, no, altruism is immoral? Don't you want that? Like, can we find some common ground? So I'm really glad that you're here. I'm glad that I found you. I'm glad that I get to participate. And Isaac, I'm like you. Some of the abstract ideas, I really need to make them more tangible for me. That's my word. I don't know if that's the best word, but so in the debates that I've been on or discussions on Twitter, I try to, have these people like Cody and Jacob, and they're coming at it from the academic, philosophical. And I'm just, I'm a bookkeeper, I'm like an accountant, like that's not my deal. So I do, it's an effort, and I can appreciate the effort too that you have to take to try to make these things more tangible. And that's why I'm really glad to be here. So thanks.
Thanks for that, Jennifer. The issue with talking as a Christian to objectivists is partly they like the fact that you are undermining what they take to be the enemy position. And then partly they're concerned because they're like, hey, you're going to create a watered down version of what we're offering. That's what they're concerned about. They don't want, like, they're looking at it strategically long term. And I mean, it would be like, imagine, like, so this is what Greg Salmieri told me one time. I said, hey, we want to have this discussion happening about Christianity and objectivism. We want to have Christians discussing objectivism from the Christian point of view. And he's like, oh, that's cool. Yeah, we think that as objectivism expands its influence in the culture, that'll probably happen. And there are going to be Christian groups discussing objectivism. There's going to be socialist groups discussing objectivism. And so from his point of view, it's like, sure, I guess it's fine if socialists are discussing objectivism. But he doesn't necessarily like the idea of there being like a fusion between socialism and objectivism. That would be, in his mind, contradictory and potentially has the ability to confuse people or inoculate them against the straight up version of what they're trying to put into the society. They don't want to inoculate people. They want to transform people, and they have a vision of it. So that's the problem. And when he told me that, I was like, dang, man, you think of Christians as being as far away from your viewpoint as socialism? And it's not true. That's only if you were to construe Christianity as the liberal Catholic school, the school of the current Pope or something. Like, sure, he's as far away, but we are not that far away. I mean, you can see how close we are by how many times in this book that Leonard Peikoff makes references to Christianity, because Christianity, as Jordan Peterson points out, it's like this substrata of where our current culture has arisen from. It's arisen from Christianity. It's impossible for Peikoff to go like a chapter without mentioning God and without pulling in Christian turns of phrase and context, because that's the context that we all share. And I think that objectivism is largely dependent on Christianity and Christian culture for it to even come into existence. I get the sense that there was a lot consonant between Ayn Rand and Christianity that she wasn't aware of because she got the wrong version of Christianity. Any other discussion, anybody, before we wrap up? All right, well, thank you guys. I appreciate it. And I'll get going now, and I'll see you next week. We'll pick up where we left off.